It's Women's Month 2024, a time to celebrate and honor the great women of history and fiction. We acknowledge their contributions, their impacts, and content of their character. And yes, this does also include anime, which itself has had a long history of interesting, complex, and badass women. But it has been an interesting climb to get where we are today in terms of cool animated ladies. So it's important to start this with some history, or at least historical discussion. I've touched upon feminism in several videos in the past. It doesn't take much research to see the disparity between both sexes, from less rights to less pay to even less respect. It's troubling, to say the least. So the feminist movement has been incredibly crucial, continuing for several decades in several waves. And its impact has gone further than just real life. Fictional ladies were, for a long time, quite cliché. They were damsels to be saved, eye candy to watch, objects to be desired. Not to say we didn't get any women in fiction who were noteworthy, but they weren't the majority, especially when it came to action. Over time, modern creators and audiences started accepting and allowing women to be important characters in stories, but this eluded the action genre for a while. Occasionally, we get an Ellen Ripley or Mitoko Kusanagi, but they were stacked up against many more of the opposite sex. Thankfully, we eventually started getting even more ladies who could kick some ass, both here in the West and in the world of anime. The issue with women being the focus of many action anime was that, for a while, the biggest genres of action had a predominantly male crowd. Mecha, shonen, sci-fi, they were marketed and made more for men than for women. This seemed to change as anime itself became more accessible, traveling outside of Japan to the rest of the world in the late 80s and early 90s. I think one of the most breakout fighting women in anime early on was, as mentioned earlier, Mitoko Kusanagi from Ghost in the Shell. It's pretty interesting and kind of fitting that movies about identity played a big part in women getting their foot in the door in action anime. Mitoko's design and complex character greatly inspired many that came after her. And keep in mind, the Ghost in the Shell movies were made in the mid-90s, when Dragon Ball Z basically ruled anime, especially in the West. It's pretty impressive that the movie and this character left the kind of impact they did. Many others would follow in her footsteps, like San from Princess Mononoke, Asuka from Evangelion, and Faye Valentine from Cowboy Bebop. For as much as the 80s explored the idea of women being strong, the 90s really opened up the door to the idea. Most waifus that people remember from the 90s were, in some way, kind of badass. It does make a bit of sense, because the 90s were kind of a transitional period from the gritty 80s to the more modern and toned-down 2000s. So the women were also rather gritty, but writers had a more modern touch with them and made them more important and likable. And of course, things didn't stop there. Anime in the 2000s really exploded with the idea of powerful women. Even in shonen, which is anime marketed and created for teenage boys, there were plenty of cool ladies. And honestly, these ones are personally some of my favorites. I understand and completely respect the legacy of earlier characters, and I also know that these other characters probably wouldn't exist if it weren't for them. But I think both creators and audiences were really open and interested in the idea of fighting females around this point, and it does show. Just to name a few of my favorites, there's Yoko Littner from Gurren Lagann, Urza Scarlet from Fairy Tail, Saris Victoria from Hellsing Ultimate, Yoruichi Shihon from Bleach, Riza Hawkeye from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, Revi from Black Lagoon, Birdie Seafoam from Birdie the Mighty Decode, and many more. Each of these characters defied expectations, being complex, interesting, and fully fleshed out characters who also kicked major ass. Yoko destroying the gunmen to defend her students, Urza tearing through 100 monsters, Saris ripping through Nazi vampires as they attacked the manor. Though they weren't the main focus, they were given a lot of respect as characters and able to have some really impactful and awesome fight scenes. And some of these characters were even given the main focus. Birdie is the main character of her show, Birdie the Mighty Decode, and it has some very intense, well-animated, and amazing fight sequences. The final fight of Season 2 was even the inspiration for the last battle of Man of Steel. The show is very underrated. It honestly deserves more love. And Birdie herself is an incredible character. And she might not be the exact main character, but as one of the main cast, Revi is the one that everyone remembers from Black Lagoon. She gets the best scenes, the best fights, and as far as I'm aware, is everybody's favorite character. Whenever someone thinks of a badass anime character, not even limiting it to just women, most folks who watch a good amount of anime think of Revi. There were so many more badass women in anime than ever before, and thankfully, they had diversity in power, personality, and role. Despite both being snipers, Yoko and Saris are very different characters. Yoruichi and Ursa have very few similarities, as one is a lightly equipped ninja with a playful side, and the other is a regal and somewhat stoic knight clad in multiple different types of armor. We didn't just get repeats of the same kind of character with each new release, we got a multitude of different characters all unique from each other. As I said before, this even went as far as shonen battle, one of, if not the most popular genre for boys and men. I mentioned Yoruichi and Ursa earlier, but characters like Nami and Nico Robin from One Piece, Hinata and Tsunade from Naruto, Bulma and Android 18 from Dragon Ball Z show that there's been a lot of great representation in the genre. Notably, not all of them have gotten the attention that they should, but One Piece, Fairy Tail, and Bleach give their female characters a lot of great focus and battles to engage in, and people know and love them. They aren't just eye candy, they're complex and awesome. On that note, I can't really discuss a feminist topic without bringing up the fan service controversy. People have taken issue with the sexier designs of some of these characters. While it is true that they are often very attractive and dressed in provocative outfits, there's two important things to remember: context and style. Characters like Hinata and Android 18 are often adorned and remembered for more conservative outfits, because that's the kind of character they are, whereas Ursa and Nami are different. Ursa has no qualms with nudity and is kind of like one of the guys in some ways, and Nami she's a pirate at sea. And most of the crew around her also wears very little. They have the sun beating down on them at all times. It's like saying Yoko is bad for wearing a bikini and booty shorts when both of her male cohorts are completely shirtless. Some creators draw their characters differently, and some characters prefer to dress differently. As long as the outfit matches the character, there really shouldn't be an issue. And let's also remember that anime is often an over-the-top medium, so characters will generally have an exaggerated design. With that said, we've continued to see a lot of great, powerful women in anime as the years go by, with many of them upgrading from supporting characters to the main characters. Jean from Case Study of Vanitas, Emi Yusa from The Devil's a Part-Timer, Nobara Kugisaki from Jujutsu Kaisen. They've turned out to be extremely interesting and complex characters, sometimes even being the best characters of their respective shows. Even with the large cast of amazing characters, Maka Alburn from Soul Eater makes for an incredible lead character who stands tall among the rest. Medaka Box is literally named after the main character, Medaka, who's enjoyably quirky and incredibly powerful. And who could forget the show that everyone says saved anime in the 2010s, Kill la Kill. This show is filled with badass women, Ryuko Matoi being, in my opinion, one of the best main protagonists in anime. The influence of these characters has spread even just beyond anime. They've played a part in Western media. People have seen and loved these characters, and have gone on to write and create shows that have a lot of similar beats, and have created some badass ladies of their own. We've certainly come a long way from the old days, when women were more often damsels in distress or stepped away from the main conflict. Now they join in on the fight, and even take the whole spotlight from the boys in many cases. And in my opinion, that is something truly worth celebrating.